This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Coming up on This Week in Agribusiness, Missouri farmers highlight the diversity of their ag industry to visitors from around the country. Hello everyone, I'm Mike Pearson. Thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. Last week, I had the opportunity to travel with PR and marketing experts in the ag industry down to St. Louis for a tour of farm operations ahead of the National Agri-Marketing Association's annual convention. We had the chance to tour a variety of different farms, a dairy operation run by the Regal family. We talked about how they've expanded and modernized in recent years, and we'll have that conversation later on in this week's episode. We also had the chance to talk with that same dairy about their recent expansion into hemp growing and processing. Tune in future weeks for that conversation. After talking to Brian Regal, we traveled to Pacific, Missouri to talk with the owners of Crooked Creek Beef, a direct-to-consumer beef operation that in recent years has expanded into weddings. And most recently, they've partnered with a mushroom production facility, and they're growing those mushrooms right on the premises. A lot is happening in the world of agriculture, folks. Stay with us over future weeks for the rest of those stories. One thing I did hear a lot on the tour was a focus on sustainability. Now, that was also a focus when we were up at the World Dairy Expo last week. I had the chance to talk with CEO of Edge Dairy Farmer Cooperative, Tim Trotter, about how dairy farmers can sell that story.
Our farmers realize that they want to, set their farms for the future, and the future is, the consumers are going to want to know more information about where their products come from. So we have a sustainability initiative within our footprint to make sure that our farmers are best aligned with the marketplace. So that's understanding the data on your farm. How sustainable am I? Do I have metrics on that? Can I share that with my processor? Will that be able to be leveraged for better markets in the future with the brands that they sell to? We have ongoing projects with large CPGs right now, trying to do that alignment from the farm to the table, but through the marketplace that we currently have. To me, that's the next dimension. How do farmers leverage their on-farm data and the great work that they do every day for a better market?
And so it sounds like the idea is basically we're going to market in a way that we find consumers who are willing to pay a little extra for this kind of information or history.
Well, yeah, essentially working with the processors who have that market opportunities. We want our farmers to be really strategically aligned with their marketplace. It's not a transaction anymore, it's a relationship. And how does that relationship correlate to better opportunities for their farms? So again, it's big picture, but it's happening, and we're really excited about it, and our farms are really getting jazzed about it too. When we have farmers who have over 5 years worth of data, and they're just knocking it out of the park on sustainability metrics, those people are lining themselves up for the marketplace. We want all of our members to have that opportunity.
Thinking back to the 9-state territory that Edge represents, what sort of processing do you see growing in that territory? Is it cheese? Is it butter? Where's the value?
Well, absolutely cheese. It's probably over 90% cheese. We do a lot of work in the butter industry as well. We do have some fluid milk, so we do touch all segments of the marketplace. But obviously, you think up the upper Midwest, you think cheese, right? I mean, internationally, that's the product. But again, we look at all dairy utilization's great. Dairy is the best form of protein for anybody throughout the world. Then we are really the opportunity in the Midwest to have exports that we haven't even realized today. And I think with this data and with this market alignment, we really think Edge members will have a benefit in the future.
I'll throw this question to you. Edge, Northern Dairy Cooperative, of course, butting up against Canada. Have you had any troubles there with the Canadians working exports across the border for members?
Well, all I can say is, we're always monitoring the agreement that we have on trade, and that is not an easy track. We do know that the ambassador is working hard to keep them accountable. But no, I think we're on the offensive. Obviously we want to make sure that we're well represented on trade, but we're looking to the future. We have to be willing to stand on our own 2 feet and know that the government's going to be behind us. So it's kind of two prongs, but we're really working on the market access side.
Lots of policy coming, lots more market dynamics in the year ahead. Are you still optimistic that dairy producers up north are going to have something to be excited about as you look down the line?
Well, absolutely. We always have ups and downs in the marketplace. Any farmer will always look for room for improvement. What's really difficult is managing the growth of the expenses and the cost of inflation, the cost of labor. Labor is a huge issue for our farms. Just trying to find good, capable people that want to do the work, because this is not easy work. So I think there's a lot of elements that are concerning. But again, I think they're all looking at it, you know what, we'll get through this. We always have. We got through COVID, and that was a big disruption for the dairy category. But within 90 days, we began to see some relief. So really quickly, our industry adapted. But again, we want to look to the future, and I think our members are really optimistic.
That was Tim Trotter, CEO of the Edge Dairy Farmer Cooperative, which represents dairy growers across 9 states in the northern Midwest. There has never been a better time to upgrade your combine, tractor, and grain cart tires. Save up to $300 per tire when you buy 2 or more eligible Firestone Ag radial tires this fall. Visit firestoneag.com for more details. And now it's time to discuss the markets. Joining us this week is Dan Huber of the Huber Report. And Dan, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
This week, we saw the market anticipating the October World Agricultural Supply and Demand estimates. Dan, we'll get into those details in a moment.
Very good.
But overall, what's the sentiment here in the grain trade in this harvest season of 2023?
Well, I mean, certainly markets have been dragging recently, I guess the best you could say. Beans have been under a little bit of additional pressure, but, you know, I think we're anticipating a good harvest overall. I mean, certainly not record numbers, but, you know, ample supplies domestically, worldwide, so that's just allowed prices to seasonally drift down here into harvest time. And, you know, the grains, especially corn and wheat, have kind of stabilized, but, you know, up until this week, soybeans have been still on the defensive. But you know, maybe some of that's going to change a little bit after the reports here today.
Well, let's get into those details. You mentioned beans might be the bright spot of this most recent WASDE report. Dan, what was it that stands out to you as maybe a green shoot in that market?
You know, realistically, the domestic numbers were a little bit friendly. The carryout domestically was left unchanged at 220 million bushels. Trade was looking for something around 230 million, so it's mildly supportive there. But the biggest change came in the world ending stocks, where they reduced the projected carryout around 4 million metric tons. So, you know, it doesn't change it from bearish to bullish by any stretch of the imagination, but anytime you have ending stocks reduced, theoretically that means prices should stabilize or maybe even move higher. So, you know, puts a little brighter picture on the soybeans at least for the short term here.
For the short term, Dan, right. Because one of the things I noticed was the expectation that Brazil's soybean production is going to increase again this next year. Does that jive with what you're hearing?
Oh, absolutely. You know, and again, they're really, of course, just getting planting on the soybeans here at this point in time. Weather has been, you know, a little bit too wet in the south, maybe not quite enough moisture in the central parts of the region. But I mean, planting has started at a pretty average pace, but they have all the economic incentive in the world. I mean, the real remains depressed against the dollar, which gives them all the more incentive to put more acreage out there. It looks like they'll probably do it even at the expense of corn this year. So it's, you know, beans are what they do best, and that's what they're going to try to do this year.
So for growers who are running those combines right now, maybe bean yields are coming in a little better than expected. They've got some unpriced bushels. Dan, what do you do? Well,
you know, I would probably be a little bit patient at this point. I think we have room for a rebound, but I would stop short of saying a major rally. Look at the carry in the market. There's a fair amount of carry after the July. Don't leave that at risk. I mean, I think if you're going to sell, you take advantage of the carry, but also recognize that as time goes on, we'll eliminate that carry. So that's that 50, 60 cents that's out there is what you're at risk for at this point.
It's there for the taking right now.
It is. Yes,
Dan,
it is.
over on the corn side, we did see some small changes in the WASDE report. Anything that the market's going to take exceptional notice to?
Not exceptional. I mean, everything leaned just a little bit to the friendly side. Yield numbers were a touch under expectation, as was both the production number and the carryout domestically and on the global standpoint. So, you know, it probably gives us a reason to think we could lift prices away from where they are right now in this kind of harvest base. But again, for a long, extended rally, you know, that's probably not in the cards right now.
Exports. Dan, are we getting any indication that export business is coming back to the U.S.?
Well, other than standard business, no. I mean, yes, you want to see export business this time of year. I mean, you need to kind of make up for you know, what the slack will be as you get out in the later months, and particularly when you look at the beans, when you start getting in the South American harvest here post first of the year. But yeah, we have some business, but boy, it's certainly nothing that's going to set any records. And, you know, competitively, we're just not there on the world market right now.
Dan, we have seen oil prices come up a little bit. Is that bullish for ethanol demand?
Well, that maybe if there is a story in the corn market, it is because of energies, so that probably continues. And they've had great margins, so they're going to continue to put out what they can. Oil prices, though, as a whole, in the last couple of weeks, granted the situation in the Mideast has given us a little psychological boost, a little risk factor boost in there, but I think that overall that's subsiding. And there's still a lot of concern about the global economy. Are we going to really start slowing down? Which, of course, if that happens, not good for oil demand.
It isn't. We'll have a lot more to discuss when we come back with more with Dan Huber. There has never been a better time to upgrade your combine tractor and grain cart tires. Save up to $300 per tire when you buy 2 or more eligible Firestone Ag radial tires this fall. Visit firestoneag.com for more details. And we're back talking markets with Dan Huber of the Huber Report. Dan, we discussed the impact of this most recent USDA report on corn and soy. My next question is wheat. There has not been much to write home about in the wheat market as of late. Is that changing?
Not really. I mean, and again, the numbers that were out today were leaning just a little bit to the friendly side. And truly, wheat is the only market globally that you can really make a story about. I mean, its ending stocks have consistently, on a global standpoint, decreased over the last several years. Is it to a critical level? Certainly not. And sure, I mean, wheat is. Sometimes you'll generate excitement just because it is truly a foodstuff, but here again too, nobody's really clamoring to stock up at this point in time. So yes, we're probably due for some rallies, but again, I would not look for long, extended type periods of stronger prices.
Dan, over the past 2 years, in the wheat market specifically, there have been headline rallies. News happens over in Russia, Ukraine, wheat market spikes. We haven't had one of those since this past summer. No. Has the market adjusted to the global situation?
Well, I think that is probably indicative of the overall feeling toward commodities at this point in time. We had our bubble 2 years ago, prompted partially by inflation, prompted partially by what happened in Ukraine, Russia. We've adjusted to that. People have adjusted production to try to compensate for it. So, boy, unless we can find another reason weather-wise to start panicking, it's probably going to be difficult to do so. Australia's a little dry. Argentina's certainly dry. So, that could trim back some production figures as we move along, but neither of them would necessarily be, major market-moving factors.
Winter wheat acreage in this country, Dan, do we expect that to continue to grow as more folks explore double crop?
Oh, over time possibly, but boy, we have for the most part exported our wheat production to other countries. And wheat that is one crop that seems to grow just about anywhere. So it's a little hard to justify taking away corn and bean acres for that to happen. So.
That's a really good point. Dan, while we're talking, of course, one of the things that we saw impacted by inflation at the grocery store was meat prices. Beef has been up at record levels. Cattle prices are still very strong.
Right.
How much longer into winter can that continue?
Well, the cattle market is one that's it's kind of on the edge here right now. We of course saw a major rally from the spring into the summer months. Looked like it had maybe peaked, but we've had a kind of a secondary move here as of late. But boy, that just seems to be running out of gas. You're getting beyond the cookout season, which always tends to trim back on demand for beef. I'm going to say right now is looking at pretty shaky territory on this cattle market, moving in higher, and may of course start turning in the other direction. Hogs, a little bit different story. The latest hog and pig report was certainly not bullish per se, but on the same token, I think there's where the demand has shifted over the lower cuts of meat. I have seen there's a little bit of concern now of avian flu maybe popping up here and there again. So and again, that could direct more people to look at the hog market. So I'm a little more friendly in the hogs than maybe the cattle or any other meats at this point in time.
That was a good point about the avian influenza first outbreak since several months, I believe, this past week, Dan.
Exactly, yep.
We also saw this past week the CPI, Consumer Price Index, released from the U.S. government. Inflation still with us. Has the money crowd moved on? Are we no longer buying commodities to cover inflation?
And I think it's been dispersed into other areas. And of course, one of the major things there, be it the commodity market or even the equity market, is the fact that we now have interest rates that are competitive as far as a return on investment. So I think you're seeing more and more money flow over into those fixed instruments, and that just drives up money moving into the commodity sector or the equity sector.
And I would imagine if rates stay high, that flow will continue, Dan.
Oh, absolutely. And right now we may not see interest rates move significantly higher, but chances of them turning lower are very slim at this point.
All right, lots to think about, Dan, as we look out to the future. That's Dan Huber of the Huber Report. Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. Yes, harvest is moving along across most places in the Midwest, but growers are already thinking ahead to next year. One of the key considerations, getting the most bang for your fertilizer buck. Chad Colby has an update on that technology.
This past year at the Farm Progress Show, you saw great tillage demonstrations like you see here from John Deere. This is their new strip till bar. And throughout the showgrounds, there were a lot of great new strip till bars on display. What you're looking at here, this is the Kraus Gladiator. This is Randy Oberle's new machine, and I caught up with Randy this week. I was kind of anxious to see what technology he used in the cab. He'd been telling me about this new project he had, and I was pretty interested to see it.
It's got a Dickie John blockage sensor on each row. Number one, making sure that we have fertilizer flowing to each row, but then also showing us that we've got a similar rate going to each row. And so it, kind of taking blockage sensors to the next level.
I noticed you had one plug up, and it popped right up on the monitor, showed us, we went right to that row. That's got to be a little bit of insurance just to make sure that it's working. I know for years and years, the only time you really checked is when you walked around the machine. Maybe you did a little test when you loaded up every 30 acres. What does this save you in terms of efficiency?
It's a peace of mind. We're putting our fertility plan out here, and so if we've got rows plugging up, we don't want that to be the case, because that'll have long-term yield effects, carrying into next year. So the ability to know that we're getting the right rate on each row is worth quite a bit.
I'm sure you noticed that monitor. That's the 2020 monitor from Precision Planting, the same one you plant with and goes in your combine. Interesting how they've taken that same technology from the seeding application and moved it over to dry fertilizer. With a rate controller, Randy told me he's got a halfway disconnect. I love seeing technology like this to monitor important product like fertilizer. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. Even with the recent price drop in fertilizer, it always makes sense to get it right where you want it. Stick around. Later on in the program, we'll take a look at more technology, this time as it pertains to what's growing in the field with our friends from BASF for a Plant Smart, Grow Smart series. Leave it here.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hypro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
Welcome back, folks. Thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. Now we're going to give the floor over to our friend Charlie Behrens for another update on his Ag States of America.
The United States of America can be very different from one state to another, but one thing every state has in common is agriculture.
Hey everyone, I'm Charlie Behrens and welcome back to the Agricultural States of America, where we explore the agriculture of different states and hopefully give you some more appreciation for all the great things that farmers are producing across America. Now today we're looking at the agriculture in Vermont. Vermont is the second least populated state behind Wyoming, but it contributes significantly to agriculture not just in the US, but around the world. Kind of like an ant carrying something 20 times its weight, Vermont is small, but a mighty contender in American agriculture. In Vermont, the ag industry is behind only tourism and manufacturing in terms of economic impact. Now, most of the land in Vermont is very hilly and rocky, thanks not only to the Green Mountain Ridge, but also the Appalachian, Hoosic, and Taconic. While you might be thinking this terrain is perfect for your next ski trip, it's also ideal for raising livestock, including llamas, sheep, goats, and cows. According to the USDA, Vermont is home to 120,000 dairy cows spread among approximately 700 family-run dairy farms. The economic importance of the dairy industry is significant, with cash receipts around $500 million per year. Then when you add in tourism, especially to the iconic and historic Vermont dairy barns, the economic impact is even higher. Now that's pretty sweet, but if you want to hear something even sweeter, the Vermont state tree is the sugar maple, and the state produces almost 2 million gallons of maple syrup every single year, also known as 9 out of 10 dentists' worst nightmare. Vermont is #1 in the US and #2 in the world for maple syrup production, second only to Quebec, Canada, which I guess is fair considering Canada's flag. I mean, it's just a maple leaf, so of course they're going to be #1. Vermont's maple syrup production, though, isn't just about quantity. The state has its own quality grading system that maintains a higher standard of density than the rest of the US. These strict quality standards grade the syrup on 4 characteristics: color, clarity, density, and flavor. I mean, it's like they're grading diamonds, except it's better because you can't put diamonds on pancakes. I don't care how much they cost, they don't make your pancakes taste better. That's why maple syrup, much better than diamonds. Okay, rant over. In addition to dairy and maple products, Vermont's other top agricultural offerings include turkeys, chicken eggs, hogs, apples, sweet corn, Christmas trees, honey, and hay. Vermont is the #1 hay producer in New England, as its climate and terrain are ideal for growing it. While sourcing ingredients from local farmers, Vermont is known for several iconic and delicious foods, including award-winning artisan cheese and gourmet chocolates, thanks in part to the Vermont dairy industry. So the next time you're in the market for a Valentine's gift, just hit up Vermont. Residents and visitors can also get some protein from locally sourced eggs, venison, bison burgers, and organically raised lamb. For a side, you can always try out fiddleheads, which are young, curled, edible fern fronds harvested and used as a vegetable. And of course, to round out your meal, may I suggest a dessert? You can enjoy sugar on snow, an apple cider donut, or a maple creamy. All classic Vermont treats, guaranteed to make you check your insulin levels. Now, to make sugar on snow, it's pretty easy. It's just you're basically taking fresh snow and you're adding a bunch of heated maple syrup. And I've been told it's best served with a sour pickle or plain donut on the side. And what's a maple syrup creamy, you ask? Now, why it's called a creamy and not soft serve beats me. But there are a bunch of other ways people say soft serve ice cream. In fact, some places outside the US call it a Mr. Whippy, Soft Whip, Mary Cream, or a Softie. Regardless of what you call it, I'll take 2 creamies. And that's all the time we have for now, but you can always go to pivotbio.com/agstates, click on the show icon to explore more about the agriculture of your favorite states and test your knowledge to win great prizes and more. I'm Charlie Behrens, and we'll see you next time on the Agricultural States of America.
Thank you, Charlie. As always, a great look into the agricultural production of the 50 different states we call the United States of America. However, I do have a slight bone to pick with Charlie this week. As we're talking about Vermont, he mentioned perhaps their most famous or favorite tree crop, maple syrup. There's another tree crop that's very important in that state, and this year has been a troubling one for those growers, and it's apples. Vermont, of course, has long summer days that get plenty warm for those apples to develop, and this time of year, those nights up in those mountain foothills get crisp, and that helps bring strong apple production to the state of Vermont in a typical year. However, in the spring of 2023, back in this May, Vermont was confronted with a very late freeze, and it decimated apple production. Orchard growers were concerned all year watching some trees develop without any apples at all, and for some folks, they did get apples develop, but they tend to be smaller, perhaps misshapen, and this has created some real struggles for those orchard growers because in Vermont, so many folks love to get out and look at the pretty colors. They plan a lot of you-pick orchards. Folks like to come out, enjoy the fall ambiance, and grab a bushel of apples. And this year, many of those you-pick operations, unfortunately, have had to close, devastating those farms' bottom lines. Folks, stay with us for more This Week in Agribusiness. When we come back, we'll have Greg Solier with his weather update looking into the future. And at the end of the show, we'll take a look at that Regal Dairy.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. You know, it's no surprise, innovation really is the heart of agriculture. We continue to see yield gains, and that's because of the technology we're putting into the plants and the chemicals. Recently, Max had a chance to sit down with our friends from BASF for our latest in the Plan Smart, Grow Smart series, and this week he was especially curious about innovation.
Well, we understand BASF has several new products coming along. Give us some background for what's happening here with these new introductions.
Max, I'd be happy to. So I think it's no surprise the ag industry is always fraught with new challenges. And so BASF is constantly committed to finding new innovations, not only for the problems we're seeing today, but the things that we might be seeing in the future.
How does the BASF team approach innovation?
I'd say first and foremost, we need to think about what are the problems that farmers are facing. Is there a disease we're having a hard time controlling? Is there a resistance to particular weeds we need to have a different product to help provide a solution for? And then it really does take over 10 years of research and development to bring those to market. So we've got teams dedicated solely to finding innovations for today's problems, but then also thinking about what are the problems we're going to be facing in the future, and then how do we provide and find technologies for those problems as well.
I know from previous visits it's a robust pipeline that BASF has. Can you give us some feel for how much might be in the pipeline?
So if we think about from 2020 to 2025, the stat we like to use is we're going to have 25 new innovations between that 5-year period. And whether that be seed innovation, crop protection innovation, digital innovation, we've got something coming for farmers all across the U.S. So not everybody's going to be impacted by all 25. Farming can be very regional, but if farmers are interested in knowing what's going to be more local to them, we do have a website completely devoted to innovations coming down the pipe. So ag-innovations.basf.us.
Can you give us an overall view, just maybe a 10,000-foot view of how research is handled at BASF?
First and foremost, you need to find the AI, when we think about traditional chemistry, that's going to be effective on whatever the challenges you're facing. Now, that said, we also need to make sure that it's going to be safe on anything else that's on that farm. From that point, once we find the AI, it's about 11 years of research and development to get that to market, and almost $300 million. So a lot of investment going into that. But between finding the AI, taking the time to get it into a formulation that's going to stay in a sprayer and suspension, but also stay in a jug on the shelf, making sure it'll go through nozzles in a way that's not going to plug up a system. There's a lot of technology that goes into not only the AI piece, but the formulation development piece. And then beyond that, getting manufacturing to scale to be able to get this product into a bulk tank or a tote or a jug to get it out to our farmers. So that's not to say anything of the regulatory process that comes through getting the regulatory and federal approvals as well. So it's quite a timeline and it's a lot of money, but if we've got problems out there that need solving, we continue to invest daily into agriculture for the U.S. farmer.
Well, thanks, Max and Kate, for that discussion. And folks, you can see all of the Plan Smart, Grow Smart series at the website, plansmartgrowsmart.com.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Yes, indeed. It's time to check in on what's happening from a weather perspective around the country. And for that expertise, we turn to our friend Greg Solier. Greg, looking out at the Pacific Northwest, it seems as though it's starting to get more active out in that part of the country. Is that typical for this time of year?
Yeah, for the time of year, nothing too surprising. Jet stream begins to dig a little farther south with the advance of cold air out of the Canadian prairie and regions up towards the Arctic Circle. And this is not an impressive weather system. We've had a couple of systems previous to this, but still a long way to go in improving dryness and drought over the northern Rockies, back into northern California, northward into the Willamette Valley and Rogue River Basin. Meanwhile, off to the east of this trough making its way across the Pacific Northwest, we get a little moderation in temperatures, couple of showers. Yes, we have ended the growing season. Nothing unusual for this October calendar date across the Dakotas on east into parts of Minnesota and the western Great Lakes region. This pushes some slightly chillier air into the Pacific Northwest. The system blows on by, a couple of wet snowflakes snowflakes into parts of Big Sky Country, parts of the southern Canadian Prairie, a little rain into the northern plains. You may be trying to find the trash cans coming off the 50-plus mile-an-hour winds from the storm last week. But in any event, it's a quieter scenario as you move into the central plains. Slightly cooler air across the northern and central Rockies. Next weather system approaching, not a big deal into northern California and the Pacific Northwest. The southern reflection of that weather system up to the north is down here across the Four Corners area. Really nothing too exciting this week. Some late season warmth and heat across the central and southern valleys, desert southwest. Cotton harvest moving along in through Arizona. And a little bit of a push of some cooler air into the central and southern plain states areas. Again, some pretty rough conditions regarding dryness and drought and no real substantial improvement. Kind of a trademark of El Nino expected here in the weeks and months to come, despite a little more frequency of weather systems of late across the nation's heartland. Here's the next weather system, part of that Pacific Northwestern feature. A little dip in the jet stream across the Four Corners, desert southwest, a little drop off in temperatures, and maybe a couple of snowflakes and rain showers across the central divide. Parts of the plain states, a couple of thunderstorms, no significant moisture, back into some cooler weather into the valleys of California late in the week.
Well, looking across the central part of the country, Greg, I've heard from some friends in recent days that this rain has caused some combines to get parked. Does it look like they can be back in the field?
I think with time, you know, it's the old trade-off here this time of the year. I want to get harvest done. I need moisture reduction and dry down. It's too dry. I'm in the midst of a drought-ridden weather pattern. We got rain this week. It came at a price with some wind as well. I'm sure some of these compromised stalks over parts of the western and northern Corn Belt back into the plains were bent on over and probably need some different implements to get it picked up. In any event, though, 3-4 inches of rain. That's the trade-off we had here last week from the Black Hills, including a touch of snow into the central and southern parts of the Corn Belt, at least as it applies to the Midwestern area. So it's a quiet weather pattern. Frosty down towards the Ozarks to start. Windy, colder weather, sprinkles and snowflakes into the Great Lakes region. The next weather system, not an impressive one. We do not have the Pacific moisture that worked in and the Gulf moisture from Lydia and Max that made its way into the Midwest last week. A couple of brief light rain showers across the plains later into the week. High pressure and control, cool for the time of year, but opportunities maybe in select areas where you missed out on significant rains to get the combines a rolling. Pretty quiet weather pattern, dryness and drought. The story here into the eastern areas of Kansas, worsening there, Oklahoma, and it's just blowtorched out of eastern Texas and especially through Louisiana. A little bit of a boundary here, but the jet stream is primarily up to the north, so no organized rains early in the week. We do get into a couple of scattered showers and thunderstorms. No real cold air. Temperatures moderate across the central and southern plains down through Texas, the Gulf Coast area. And so, Mike, a long way to go. It's like 85-90% of those pastures just absolutely in horrible condition across parts of the central Gulf Coast region.
It is tough there in the deep south, Greg, but what are farmers in the East Coast experiencing this next week?
Overall, the eastern Corn Belt, I think, in a relatively better order. There's a definite November look and feel of late. From the Great Lakes region to the Ohio Valley, had a little whimper of frost all the way down to the Ohio last week. Didn't really end the growing season, and crops are certainly well enough along. They're more mature western Corn Belt than they are east, but we're getting there. So this weather system wound up with some wind and scattered shower activity and flakes of snow as you get up into the Canadian Prairie, north of the St. Lawrence. There may be a little freeze into parts of Michigan, lower lakes region, interior sections of the northeast and New England late in the week. Some frost down towards Delmarva. The next weather system into the western Corn Belt. Nothing of significance. Opportunity with time, we think, for the combines to roll as the week wears on. Some cool weather, a little showery and still too wet here, too dry into the mid-south region, back west through Louisiana and Texas. A couple of showers down through Florida early in the week. Later in the week, no significant weather system. A couple of showers here. Dry time for the mid-Atlantic region and a hit-miss shower thunderstorm chance for parts of the Delta region.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, it's time for some more detail on the upcoming forecast with our meteorologist friend, Greg Solier. And Greg, you mentioned some folks might see some rain next week. Who's going to get what and when?
Maybe parts of the far southern plains and sections of Texas, the Gulf Coast area. The maps and charts are suggesting maybe an inch to locally 2 inches if we play our cards right down through the Delta region. Parts of Texas, again, this is still another 5 or 6 days out, but we think in this particular corridor, interesting to see last last week's weather that originated across the Pacific, moved into the Gulf. That's moisture from Lydia and Max that made its way on northward. In any event, just scattered moisture for the Midwest, the northeastern states. There should be opportunity for combines to roll here with time coming off that corridor of significant rain over the central Corn Belt and the worst drought areas. Quarter to half inch down through Florida. Widely scattered, hit and miss. Don't bet on it in the Pacific Northwest.
Temperature-wise, Greg, what are you watching for the week of October 23rd?
Still lingering effects of this big wound-up upper circulation that it should be up through the North Atlantic by now, but temperatures a few degrees below average all the way down into parts of Dixie. Normal from Florida back up into the heart of the central Corn Belt. Look at the warm-up, trademark of El Nino out across areas west of the Missouri. That will be on the move, but not much on the move moisture-wise here. Look at this. Yeah, there'll be opportunities. No need to push it, rush it. Safety first with outdoor work and harvest in mind here. A little rain down through Florida. Parts of Texas is okay. Quiet in the desert southwest. Moisture picks up in through Northern California and the Pacific Northwest.
How about the week of October 30th? It is Halloween, Greg. Going to be warm?
Nothing too spooky as we see it from this vantage point here. A little low, but some cool air and chill in the air. Hopefully you don't have to wear anything warmer over the costume into the northeast of New England. Look at the warmth, though, through Dixie, down through the Rio Grande, parts of the western states and the high plains areas, too. Moisture, rainfall, all that kind of stuff. The main storm track, Northern California, Pacific Northwest, up near the Canadian border, upper Great Lakes region into the northeast of New England. A little bit wet up and down the eastern seaboard. But again, opportunities across the Corn Belt for harvest. Not the greatest of news with dryness and drought into Oklahoma and Texas.
Does it start to cool off by the time we get to November 6th, Greg?
It does, but in the Pacific Northwest, and still no sign in this particular southwest to northeast upper air pattern of any super cold air. A little troughiness in this part of the country. Some late season warmth. We'll take it from a heating bill standpoint across much of the heartland. Southern plains a little bit cooler than average into the southeastern states. And precipitation, not a lot to speak of. About normal into parts of the western Corn Belt. Gets a little more active into the upper Midwest, northern plains, back into sections of California, but this is not a particularly stormy weather pattern either. A little more moisture for the northeast New England and across the eastern states down through Florida normal. But again, plenty of opportunity getting into November for harvest.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
If you're lucky enough to have that old tractor that your grandparents had, well, you'll tolerate some flaws, perhaps. Maybe it looks pretty good after all. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants producers are made to make it last. Well, when I first looked at this Minneapolis Moline M5, when I got up on the platform and looked down there, I saw, it's got some rust. You know, the spinner knob isn't intact. The cigarette lighter is missing there. But look at those gauges. The faces on those gauges are bright. The glass is intact. It isn't fogged. When Chad Jacobs looks at the wear that has taken place on his 1961 Moline tractor, in his mind, he also sees family. It was 1962 when Yarger Implement Company in Illinois did business with Don and Francis Shaver. Then the M5 was driven 10 miles from the dealership to the farm. It has stayed in that area of Geneseo, Illinois, its entire life. And oh yes, there is a tractor radio on the right fender there too. We figured that along with the roar of that M5, it might have impaired the hearing of someone through the years as they might have listened to the farm reports, college football game, in this case maybe the Cubs or the Cards on the radio. Mr. and Mrs. Shaver's M5 from Minneapolis Moline. I would suggest you not even think about offering Chad Jacobs something for his grandparents' tractor there at Geneseo, Illinois. Mark Stock is here with us with his weekly report now from Big Iron Auctions.
Max harvest is in full swing across the Midwest, and if you've had the unfortunate mishap with a combine, we've got some John Deere S780 combines listed on Big Iron's marketplace for immediate purchase. Check these machines out. On Tuesday, October the 17th, Hudson Inc. will have its second of 4 auctions. 216 items will be sold to the highest bidder. Compact tractors, large tractors, 4-wheel drive tractors, combines, and a whole bunch more. We also have a lot of land coming up for sale on BigIron.com on Tuesday, October 17th. 387 acres of Wallace County, Kansas land will sell Also, 2 tracts of land sell in Campbell County, South Dakota, 40 acres and 160 acres. October 19th, the Olson family will sell 2 80-acre parcels of land in Nance County, Nebraska. On Thursday, October the 19th, 153 acres will sell in Adams County, Illinois. Big Iron Auctions and Sullivan Auctioneers are still listing equipment that will sell in 2023, but the clock is running short. If you want to have your auction in December, get a hold of your area rep. Market prices are holding firm, and now is an excellent time to sell.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. Our FFA Spotlight this week looks a little bit different. Sarah Muirhead, Managing Director at Feedstuffs Magazine, had the chance to talk with FFAer Maddie Beyer at the World Dairy Expo, and she asked her about her upbringing in agriculture. Thank you, Maddie, for the time this week, and we wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. When we come back, we'll talk with Brian Regal of Regal Dairy, the farm in Missouri I had the chance to tour earlier this week. One of the things I love about the agriculture industry is the passion from a lot of the folks in it. And that passion was on display for me earlier this week as we had the chance to tour Missouri farm operations. One of the farms we toured was the Regal Dairy Farm. I had the chance to talk with Brian Regal, who is now the leader of that operation, and I could see his passion when he talked about that farm's history and its future.
Regal Dairy started back in 1947 when Grandma and Grandpa got a wedding present, as a cow as a wedding present. And from there, that had a calf and it continued on. In 1971, my dad and his 3 brothers incorporated it and took it to the next level. And in 2018, there was an opportunity for my brother, cousin, and I to further into the 3rd generation of ownership, and we're going to continue on.
Since 2018, the new generation has been able to make some changes, do some modernization. Could you talk a little bit about what you've automated here on the farm?
Some of the things we started with is we updated the milk house that was originally started in 1991. So it needed some updating, some new equipment in there to help the cow's movement and flow through. Down in the nursery area, or the calf section, we were able to add some automation, some self-feeders, so the calves can drink any time of the day as much as they want. And then it also self-weans them and prepares them for the next stage in life.
Brian, one thing I noticed throughout all of your barns, it seemed, was the sand bedding for the cows to lay on. Can you talk about what that transition was like and how you've liked the move using sand for these cows to lay on?
In 2018, we also were able to switch from a rubber mat with a calcium on top of it as a protector to a sand freestall. And when we did that, the cows within 2 months jumped to 8 pounds of milk, which was a substantial jump for us and proved that the comfort level increased dramatically with it.
So you've got more milk coming out, managing the sand and the manure. How does that work on this operation?
That comes with some of its own trials and tributes with that. The sand is heavy, it's hard to move. We use a water flush system to move the manure and everything downhill. And then we have to sort the sand back out so we can recycle it. Everything we do on the farm is either try our best to be a byproduct or recycle the waters, the sands, and things like that.
Brian, where does the milk go once it leaves your operation? What's the marketing options for a farm here in Missouri?
So we belong to a co-op, DFA, and DFA markets our milk. Most of our milk will end up in Pacific, Missouri, which will then turn into the larger commercial soft ice cream, stuff like that. Others it'll go to O'Fallon, Illinois, where it'll become bottled milk or butters and yogurts and stuff like that.
Now, Brian, you've got a big operation here. You've got a lot of people running around, and yet you took the morning off to give a tour of your operation. Why? What's the value for you in explaining how dairy works to folks who maybe don't get to see it every day?
We always try to take the opportunity when somebody wants to come in that can also share the message with others, what goes on here. We don't have much opportunity for people to visit dairy farms anymore, so they don't understand what it takes to make the milk. So when they can see it, they get a better understanding of what's happening, and they can share that story over and over again.
Looking out, Brian, you've been growing this operation, as you mentioned, many generations in the family. Where do you see it going from here?
We feel that town's closing in on us pretty quick. I don't know if we'll make it to the 4th generation as full ownership, but they're definitely got their feet on the ground here now, and they're helping us out and helping us survive.
Thank you, Brian, once again for taking the time to talk with us. And folks, tune in next week. We'll get into Brian's other business, growing and processing hemp for that new market. Thank you so much for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness, folks. I'm Mike Pearson. I appreciate you being with us. Be sure to join us next time, same place, same time, right here for more This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.